Yo, brother! You're at home with the Geek. I'm Mark, aka the Little Black Dude. Welcome back to the channel. You know, living in the future as we do, a lot of the old trappings of fandom aren't as common. Some things have become more prominent, but I'm going back. Way back. Back to when the days of fandom had simpler questions to answer. Questions like, what's the difference between manga and comics? What's your favorite comic? What's your favorite manga? Leave a comment in the down below. Both manga and comics are visual media for storytelling. Both pair words and images. Both are aimed at various age groups and tastes. So how are they different? One might argue they're not. From the perspective of content, the two operate similarly. If you compare how comics from the 80s are to comics now, you'll get a similar feeling of change in manga from the same eras. In some cases, manga received influence from American comics. In others, it's the reverse. So the two are the same, right? Well, no, I wouldn't say that. While the content of both American comics and Japanese manga have a much broader scope than anime and American cartoons do, it's their presentation that really makes the difference between the two. Lemme Esplain. In the early 90s, Dark Horse Comics, among others, struck a deal with a few manga companies to bring over a few titles for a manga series under their brands. Titles such as Megami-sama, Taiho Shitsuzo, Blade of the Immortal, Gunsmith Cats, and others were brought to America in traditional comic format. They were quite popular during the time and brought a significant amount of attention to the Japanese art form. But there was something amiss. First, the presentation of American comics is different from the presentation of Japanese manga. They face opposite ways. One of the things I noticed often when reading the adaptations from the 90s was some things seemed weird, like seeing people driving cars. Knowing that in Japan, the steering wheel is on the right side of the vehicle made it somewhat odd to me that they were driving on the left. Background elements like signs where some of the Japanese characters I knew were backwards, and other little elements clued me into the images being flipped. It's not a bad thing, but it messes with the immersion for me. Second, issue sizes are different. A standard weekly/monthly American comic issue is between 22 and 26 pages on average. For special events, it can be as much as 32 pages. The reason for this length, from my understanding, is American comics will tell a story that often is a self-contained story for just that issue. It can be part of a series, but the issue itself is a story that oftentimes will just last for that issue. With manga, often the issue contains multiple chapters of a story to tell a continuous story. I've only come across a handful of special manga that are collections of one-shots. Most popular manga are sequential. As such, the amount of story one gets at any one time is different between the two formats. Additionally, manga tended to have different dimensions than American comics. A standard American comic is roughly 10.5 inches tall by 6 3/4 inches wide. A standard manga is roughly 7 inches tall by 5 inches wide. In order to convert manga to the size of a comic, it requires stretching the image to fit the larger page dimensions. Thankfully, it didn't affect every manga, but there are some where distortion is obvious. After manga started to become more popular, the practice was abandoned in favor of publishing them at their original size. First in normal left-to-right reading for Americans, then in traditional manga right-to-left reading. I believe this made the process of publishing manga more streamlined, though it required changes in the bookmaking process if the company also produced American comics. Third, collections and compilations are different between the two. Collections of comics are often a way to introduce new readers to a series, or to catch up readers who have been away for a while by gathering stories together. In America, collections of issues are called trade paperbacks. They often collect issues that make up a full storyline, or a set number of issues from a series. Trades allow for reading an entire story in a single book, rather than collecting single issues, and are more convenient for those more interested in reading than bragging rights. Manga have tankobon, phone book-sized collections of comics. They don't always collect full stories, But in some cases, the stories collected have a similar theme. Tankobon are sometimes used as a jumping off point for new artists, or to showcase stories more established artists might have set aside from their main series. A good example of a good tankobon is Shonen Jump, where some popular series like Boku no Hero Academia and Ansatsu Kyoshitsu got their start. Finally, the content of manga and American comics differ. Most comics offer up tales of superheroes and fantasy, with smaller groups of slice of life or modern day happening type comics. While interesting stories can be found in different genres, it's more likely to find fantasy worlds made of people with extraordinary abilities, rather than a normal, everyday person or group in unusual situations. Manga tend toward a fairly equal grouping of genres. While you can absolutely find your action, adventure, and superhero manga fairly easily, there are a number of other genres that are just as popular. Drama, slice of life, romance, fantasy, and adult titles. Yes, I'm referencing hentai here. It counts. They can be found in the same bookstores in many places. Though both in America and Japan, reading comics after a certain age may be looked down upon, the art form is appreciated by people of all ages, and is often a form of escapism easily obtained. Additionally, the more even spread of genres make manga more appealing to male and female readers, and it's not uncommon for girls and women to read manga pointed at boys and men, and vice versa. There's no doubt that girls and women in America read comics, but the ratio tends to differ greatly. Comics from America or from Japan entertain by using similar tactics, but each has their own charm. Whichever you like, there is value in each. Comics can entertain, educate, and inspire. As I've enjoyed both for a long time, examining the differences only makes them more fascinating to me. Thanks for checking out this video. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up and share it with your geeky friends. I put new stuff up all the time on this channel and on my second channel, Inside the Geek. You are welcome there. I also encourage you to check out my podcast, Little Old People Podcast, with my good friend Chibi Mythos. Links to all are in the down low. Until next time, this is the little black dude. Put your fist up with me, stay geek and proud.